dripping in diamonds bought with my son's money. My daughter-in-law laughed with her friends, completely oblivious. She truly believed she had won by throwing away my father's priceless antique watch like meaningless garbage. She was entirely unaware that her precious jewelry collection was about to be sold for exactly $1. My name is Arthur. I am 68 years old, a retired structural engineer, a widower, and until a few months ago, a man who believed that blood was thicker than water. I spent my entire life building a foundation for my family. When my wife, Martha, passed away 12 years ago from breast cancer, my world shrank down to a single focal point: our only son, Leo. Leo was a good boy, smart, capable, but possessing a fatal flaw I recognized early on but failed to correct. He was a chronic people-pleaser, entirely malleable in the hands of a strong personality. And the strongest, most domineering personality he ever encountered was a woman named Chloe. When Leo introduced me to Chloe 5 years ago, I tried to be supportive. She was striking, certainly, but it was a cold kind of beauty. Everything about her was curated, from her immaculate blonde hair to her meticulously managed social media profiles. She didn't just want a life, she wanted an aesthetic. And Leo, bless his heart, was completely swept away by the glamour she projected. He was a successful software developer, pulling in a fantastic salary, and Chloe saw him not just as a partner, but as a producer for her personal reality show. 3 years into their marriage, Chloe decided they needed a house that matched her aspirations, a sprawling, modern farmhouse monstrosity in a gated community that cost well over $2 million. Leo couldn't afford the down payment on his own. So, acting as the devoted father, I made an offer. I would sell the 4-bedroom family home where Leo had grown up, give them the $600,000 equity as a gift for their down payment, and in return, I would live rent-free in the spacious, detached guest house on their new property. At the time, it seemed like a perfect arrangement. I was getting older, the empty family home was too much to maintain, and I wanted to be close to my future grandchildren. "Oh, Arthur, it's going to be absolutely perfect," Chloe had gushed, kissing my cheek with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll be one big, happy family, and your little cottage in the back will be so quaint." I should have recognized the condescension in that word, quaint. Moving in was the first sign of trouble. Chloe was obsessed with minimalism. Her house was a sterile landscape of beige, white, and brushed steel. There was no warmth, no history, no sign that actual human beings lived there. And her policing of this aesthetic didn't stop at the main house. It extended to my guest cottage. "Arthur, do you really need to keep all these old books?" she would ask, eyeing my mahogany bookshelf like it was infested with termites. "They smell so dusty. And this furniture, it's very heavy. We could get you some nice, sleek acrylic chairs from West Elm." "These are antiques, Chloe," I told her gently but firmly. "They belong to my parents. They stay." She backed off, but the battle lines were drawn. Over the next 2 years, Chloe engaged in a quiet, relentless campaign against my possessions. If I left a comfortable, worn sweater on the patio chair, it mysteriously found its way into the donation bin. If I brought over a ceramic bowl Martha had painted to share some soup, Chloe would immediately empty it, wash it, and hand it back, saying it clashed with her kitchen countertops. But there was one item I owned that I cherished above all else. It was a 1941 Patek Philippe chronograph. It had belonged to my father, who carried it through the brutal campaigns of the Second World War. The crystal was deeply scratched, the bronze casing was heavily tarnished, and the leather strap was frayed and dark with decades of sweat and history. To a casual, uneducated observer, It looked like a piece of rusted junk you'd find at the bottom of a flea market bargain bin. But mechanically, it kept perfect time. In the world of horology, it was a wildly rare piece, valued by collectors at roughly $150,000. Yet, the monetary value meant absolutely nothing to me. Inside the back casing, carefully protected from the elements, was a tiny, faded, black and white photograph of my mother, and behind that, a small, folded note my wife Martha had written to me on our 30th anniversary. To the man who holds my time, forever, M. That watch was my heart. I didn't wear it often because I was terrified of damaging it further, but I kept it on my wooden nightstand, right next to my reading lamp. Every night, before I closed my eyes, I would reach out and touch the worn leather. It was a tangible connection to the three people I had loved most in this world. Chloe, naturally, despised it. Arthur, that rusty old thing is an eyesore, she complained one afternoon when she walked into my cottage unannounced to drop off some mail. If you want a watch, Leo can buy you a nice Apple Watch or a Rolex, something that doesn't look like it was dug up from a graveyard. It's staying right where it is, Chloe, I replied, my voice hardening. Do not ever touch it. She rolled her eyes, muttering something about hoarder mentalities under her breath as she walked out. I brushed it off. I assumed that, despite her vanity and entitlement, there was a baseline level of respect for my boundaries. I was dangerously, tragically wrong. The incident happened in late October. Chloe was in a frenzy. She had managed to secure a spot in a prestigious local lifestyle magazine, which was sending a photographer and a journalist to do a feature on modern luxury living. To complement the article, she was hosting a lavish dinner party for 50 of the city's elite real estate moguls, local influencers, and tech investors. For 3 weeks, the property was a war zone of decorators, florists, and caterers. Chloe was a tyrant, screaming at landscapers for the wrong shade of white roses and berating Leo to the point where he started working late just to avoid her wrath. Wanting absolutely no part of this circus, I decided to make myself scarce. My old friend David invited me to his cabin up by the lake for a 3-day fishing trip. It was exactly what I needed. I packed my duffel bag, locked the door to my guest cottage, and drove off, leaving the madness behind. I left the Patek Philippe on my nightstand, assuming it was safe behind a locked door in my own home. I returned on a Sunday afternoon. The party was over, but the property still bore the scars of the event. Tents were being dismantled on the lawn, and catering vans blocked the driveway. I parked my truck on the street and carried my bags up the long stone path, feeling a sense of dread as I approached my cottage. When I put my key in the lock, the door swung open. It was already unlocked. I stepped inside and froze. My chest tightened. The cottage didn't look like my home anymore. It looked like a hotel room. My heavy, knitted throw blankets were gone. The stack of vintage engineering magazines I kept by my armchair had vanished. And then I looked toward my bedroom area. The door was wide open. I dropped my bags and ran in. My nightstand was completely bare. My father's watch was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I tore the bedroom apart. I stripped the bed, looked under the furniture, emptied every drawer. Nothing. I moved to the living room, checking the trash cans. Empty. They had been lined with fresh, sterile, white plastic bags. My breathing grew shallow. I stormed out of the cottage and marched straight to the main house. I didn't knock. I pushed the front door open to find Chloe lounging on her massive sectional sofa, wearing silk pajamas, scrolling through photos on her iPad. Leo was in the kitchen, brewing coffee. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a rage I had never felt in my 68 years. Chloe slowly looked up, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Where is what, Arthur? Good Lord, you're tracking dirt," onto the rug. My watch. The antique watch on my nightstand. My cottage was unlocked and rearranged. Where is it? Chloe sighed, setting her iPad down with exaggerated patience. Arthur, please, calm down. The magazine photographer wanted to take some wide shots of the property, including the guest suite, to show how versatile the estate is. I had the staging crew go in and tidy up. You had strangers go into my locked home? I roared, making Leo jump and spill coffee on the counter. Dad, hey, let's just take a breath, Leo said, hurrying into the living room, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Don't tell me to take a breath, Leo, I snapped, keeping my eyes locked on Chloe. Where is my watch? Chloe crossed her arms, entirely unbothered. If you must know, I threw it away, along with those dusty old magazines and that ratty blanket. The room spun. For a second, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. You threw it away? Where? In the trash, Arthur, where garbage goes. Chloe's voice rose, matching my volume, playing the victim. It was a rusty, scratched piece of junk. It ruined the entire aesthetic of the room. I couldn't have the photographer capturing that hoarding mess. I did you a favor. When? I whispered, my voice breaking. When did you throw it out? Friday morning, she said flippantly, right before the waste management trucks came for the special event pickup. It was Sunday. Leo, I said, my voice eerily calm now, though my hands were trembling so violently I had to clench them into fists. Tell me she is lying. Leo looked terrified. He looked from me to his wife, his jaw working but no words coming out. Dad, she didn't know. She just wanted everything to look perfect for the magazine. I'll buy you a new watch. A nice one. Whatever you want. I stared at my son, realizing in that exact moment that the boy I had raised was gone. He had been entirely consumed by this woman. That watch, I said, my voice barely a rasp, saved your grandfather's life in France. It contained the last handwritten note your mother ever wrote to me before she died. It contained her picture. It was worth $150,000, but to me, it was priceless. And you? I turned my piercing gaze back to Chloe, whose smug expression had finally faltered just a fraction, threw it in a landfill for a photograph. Chloe blinked, a brief flash of hesitation crossing her eyes before she doubled down. Well, how was I supposed to know? You shouldn't leave valuable things lying around looking like trash. It's not my fault. I didn't wait to hear another word. I turned on my heel, sprinted back to my truck, and drove like a madman to the municipal waste management facility. I spent 4 hours there. I begged the site manager. I offered him $1,000 cash just to let me look. But it was a Sunday. The manager sympathetically explained that the special pickup dumpsters from our gated community had been brought in on Friday afternoon, immediately compressed, and transferred to the regional incinerator by Saturday morning. It's gone, buddy, the manager said softly, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder, burned to ash. I'm so sorry. I stood by the chain-link fence of the dump, staring out at the mountains of garbage, and I wept. I wept for my father. I wept for Martha. I wept for the memories that had been casually tossed into an incinerator by a woman who valued a pristine Instagram grid over human history. When my tears finally stopped, a profound, chilling numbness washed over me. I drove back to the estate in total silence. As I parked my truck, I looked up at the massive, glowing windows of the main house. I could see Leo and Chloe in the kitchen. Chloe was laughing, sipping a glass of wine, already over the drama of the afternoon. She was wearing her favorite piece of jewelry, a stunning 5-carat diamond tennis bracelet. It was part of a massive collection of diamonds she kept in a biometric safe in her master closet. A collection funded entirely by Leo's income. Income freed up because I had bought their house. She thought her things were untouchable because they were shiny and new, She thought my things were disposable because they were old. Sitting in the dark cab of my truck, I made a promise to my late wife and my father. I was not going to yell. I was not going to scream or demand an apology that would never be sincere. I was going to take everything she loved, and I was going to reduce it to exactly what she thought my legacy was worth. Nothing. For 3 weeks, I played the part of the broken, defeated old man. I stayed quiet, keeping to my guest cottage, entirely avoiding the main house. Whenever Leo came by to check on me, offering weak, half-hearted apologies and promising to buy me a vintage Rolex to make up for the misunderstanding, I simply nodded, stared at the floor, and told him I just needed time to grieve. Chloe, predictably, took my silence as a total victory. In her mind, she had successfully established dominance over the territory. She had purged the estate of its last remaining sentimental blemish, and life had moved on. She paraded around the property with her head held high, throwing garden parties and snapping endless photographs of her pristine, sterile existence. But behind the locked door of my cottage, I was not grieving. I was working. You see, Chloe was profoundly arrogant, and arrogant people rarely bother to read the fine print. When we first purchased the $2 million estate, I did not simply hand my son a check for $600,000. I am a retired structural engineer. I build things with solid foundations and legally binding blueprints. The entire property was purchased under the Arthur and Martha Family Trust. I was the sole trustee and executor. Leo and Chloe were simply listed as beneficiaries who were permitted to reside on the premises. Chloe, utterly blinded by the prospect of living in a mansion, had eagerly signed the closing documents without ever consulting a lawyer. She just wanted the keys to her castle. But the foundation of her glamorous life was built on a massive financial sinkhole. Over the past 3 years, Chloe's insatiable appetite for luxury had vastly outpaced Leo's impressive software developer salary. She needed designer bags, exotic vacations, and most importantly, her crown jewels. Her diamond collection was her absolute pride and joy: tennis bracelets, chandelier earrings, a completely upgraded engagement ring, and a custom-made diamond collar necklace. To fund this lifestyle, Leo had quietly, desperately taken out a massive home equity line of credit, HELOC, against the estate. Because the trust legally owned the estate, the HELOC was tethered entirely to the trust's assets. My lawyer, a sharp, ruthless man named Thomas, confirmed my theory over a quiet cup of coffee. Any physical asset purchased using the funds from that specific credit line was technically and legally the property of the trust. My trust, my property. I had the bank statements. I had the paper trail linking the HELOC withdrawals directly to the high-end jewelers in the city. The diamonds belonged to me. Now, I just needed to acquire them. Chloe kept her precious collection in a heavy, reinforced steel biometric safe bolted to the floor of her cavernous, custom-built master closet. It required her fingerprint to open. However, every electronic safe requires a manual emergency override code in case the biometric scanner fails or the battery dies. I knew my son better than he knew himself. Leo was a creature of absolute, unwavering habit. He hated memorizing new passwords, opting instead to recycle the same numbers for everything in his life. For his entire adult life, his override code for his phone, his alarm systems, and his bank PIN had been the exact same 6 digits, my late wife's birth date. I bided my time, waiting for the perfect operational window. It finally arrived on a brisk Tuesday morning in late November. Leo was scheduled to fly to Seattle for a highly demanding 48-hour tech conference. Chloe, wanting to celebrate her upcoming appearance in the lifestyle magazine, had booked an exclusive, full-day luxury spa retreat with 3 of her equally vapid friends. The estate was completely empty. I walked up the stone path to the main house, unlocked the front door with my master key, and stepped into the deafening silence of Chloe's sterile beige kingdom. I did not hesitate. I marched straight up the sweeping glass staircase and entered the master bedroom. The closet was the size of my first apartment, lined with custom lighting and racks of clothing that cost more than most cars. In the center island, beneath a glass display case, sat the heavy steel safe. I knelt on the plush carpet. I pressed my hand against the digital keypad to wake the system. It beeped, a sharp, clinical sound. Slowly, methodically, I punched in the 6 digits, 0, 4, 1, 2, 5, 8. The mechanism whirred. A heavy metallic clack echoed through the massive closet. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, resting on tiers of black velvet, was a fortune in compressed carbon. The diamonds caught the overhead closet lights, sparkling with an aggressive, blinding intensity. There was the 5-carat tennis bracelet she had worn the night she laughed about destroying my legacy. There were the earrings. That cost more than a college tuition. There was the upgraded engagement ring, a massive, gaudy stone that she had forced Leo to buy because her original ring was embarrassing. I pulled a sturdy canvas duffel bag from my shoulder and carefully loaded every single velvet box into it. I didn't leave a single stone behind. The safe was completely, utterly empty. But I wasn't a thief. I was an executor managing trust assets. And to make this perfectly, undeniably legal, I needed to execute a sale. I left the house, locked the door behind me, and drove downtown to an area of the city Chloe would rather die than visit. I parked my truck outside a weathered brick building that served as the headquarters for the county's largest domestic violence and women's crisis shelter. I walked inside and asked to speak to the director. A hardened but incredibly kind woman named Sarah brought me into her small, cluttered office. I placed the canvas bag on her desk and unzipped it. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as the fluorescent office lights danced across hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of diamonds. "Mr. Arthur," she stammered, looking from the jewels to my face in absolute shock. "What? What is this? We can't accept stolen property." "It is not stolen, Sarah," I replied calmly, sliding a thick manila folder across her desk. "I am the legal executor of the trust that owns these assets. I have the receipts, the bank statements, and the legal right to liquidate them. I am an old man, and my family has lost its way. I want these stones to do some actual good in the world." I pulled a pre-drafted, legally binding bill of sale from the folder. "I am officially selling this entire collection to your organization. You will take these to your authorized auction house in New York, liquidate them entirely, and use the funds to build new housing for the women who need it." Sarah looked at the document, tears welling in her eyes. "Selling them? Arthur, we don't have the budget to buy even one of these clasps." I reached into my wallet, pulled out a crisp, single $1 bill, and placed it on the desk. "The agreed-upon purchase price for the entire lot is $1 single, I said, my voice steady and resolute. "Sign the paperwork, Sarah, and keep the dollar for the vending machine." She signed it. We had the shelter's notary stamp it. The transaction was complete, ironclad, and entirely legal. The diamonds belonged to the charity. I drove back to the estate as the sun began to set. I walked back up to the master closet, knelt in front of the open steel safe, and placed 3 items inside: the legally binding, notarized bill of sale, a photocopy of the HELOC trust documents proving my ownership, and a single, crisp $1 bill. I closed the heavy steel door, spun the lock, and went back to my cottage to make a pot of tea. The fallout was delayed by 3 excruciating, beautiful days. Chloe returned from her spa trip, relaxed and completely oblivious. Leo returned from Seattle, exhausted, immediately burying himself in his home office to catch up on code. The house remained peaceful. I sat in my armchair in the guest cottage, reading my vintage engineering magazines, waiting for the inevitable explosion. It happened on Friday evening. Chloe was preparing to attend the annual Winter Solstice Gala, the prestigious event of the year. She had purchased a stunning, custom emerald green gown specifically for the occasion. Naturally, a gown of that magnitude required her absolute best diamonds. I was sitting on my porch, sipping black coffee in the freezing November air, when I heard it. A scream. It was not a gasp of surprise. It was a visceral, blood-curdling shriek of pure, unadulterated horror that pierced the quiet of the gated community. It was the sound of a woman losing her entire world. Less than 30 seconds later, the back door of the main house flew open. Chloe came sprinting across the manicured lawn toward my cottage. She was wearing half her makeup, her hair pinned up, and a silk robe. Her face was contorted in a mask of absolute rage. Leo was running right behind her, looking frantic and confused. "You sick, twisted old man," she screamed, her voice cracking as she stormed onto my porch. "Where are my beautiful diamond rings?" She lunged at me, but Leo grabbed her around the waist, pulling her back. "Chloe, stop," he pleaded. "Dad, what is she talking about? The safe is entirely empty." I did not stand up. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee and looked at her, entirely unbothered. "I have no idea what you mean, Chloe. I simply finalized some financial housekeeping for the family trust." "You robbed me," she shrieked, hysterical tears streaming down her extremely flushed face. "Those were mine, my bracelets, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you absolute psycho. I am calling the police. I am having you arrested and thrown in prison to rot forever." "Call them," I said softly, gesturing toward the phone clutched in the hand of Leo. "By all means, call the authorities." Leo looked horrified, trapped between his screaming wife and his terrifyingly calm father. He dialed the emergency number. The police arrived in less than 10 minutes, with flashing lights. 2 officers approached the porch cautiously. Chloe immediately launched into a hysterical, sobbing tirade, pointing a manicured finger at my face and accusing me of grand larceny. The older officer held up a hand to silence her and turned to me. "Sir, your daughter-in-law is claiming you stole jewelry from a locked safe inside her residence. Do you have anything to say?" I set my mug down. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the file. I handed it to the officer. "This property is owned entirely by the family trust," I explained calmly. "I am the sole trustee. The financial records prove every piece of jewelry was purchased using a credit line tied directly to my trust. Legally, those assets were my property. I did not steal them. I sold them. I sold the entire collection to the local shelter for $1. The legally binding bill of sale is sitting inside your empty safe." The officer reviewed the documents slowly. He turned to Chloe, a slight grimace on his face. "Madam, according to these documents, this is a civil matter regarding trust assets. Legally, he did not steal anything. If you want to fight it, you will have to take him to civil court. But there is no crime here. We cannot arrest him." Chloe collapsed onto a vintage patio chair. Her diamonds were already in a secure vault, gone from her life forever. Leo stared at me with wide eyes. "Dad, why would you do this?" I looked at my son. "Because she threw your grandfather and his watch into an incinerator, Leo. She valued things over people." "I am not finished," I told her. "As the executor, I am terminating your residency. You have 30 days to pack your fake life and vacate my property." "This is my house," I corrected Leo firmly. The free ride is finally over for her completely. The police retreated to their cruisers. Chloe did not say a word. She stood up slowly and walked back to the main house like a ghost. Within a week, she filed for divorce. She moved out, taking only her clothes and crushing debt. Leo stayed in the empty house, finally starting therapy and learning how to build a spine. Sometimes, to save the future, you have to burn the fake kingdom to the ground to start completely fresh once again. If this story of broken trust and ultimate karma resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with your friends. Have you ever dealt with an entitled family member who pushed you too far? Let me know down in the comments section below. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily drama stories. Thank you so much for watching our video right now.